Hello, everyone. Welcome to the MLOps Beginner Podcast, where we aim to help individuals land their first MLOps job by providing valuable insights from the interviews with the MLOps professionals and also the hiring companies. We dive deep into how these professionals started their career, projects they worked on, and also the challenges they faced when they were starting their career as an MLOps beginner. So, if you are a software engineer, data scientist, ML engineer, or a data engineer willing to transition into MLOps, then this podcast is designed for you. So, without any further delay, let's welcome our guest speaker, Sadik. Welcome to the first episode of MLOps Beginner Podcast, Sadik.
Thank you very much, and good luck, Jitendra, with podcast.
Thank you, Sadik. This is our first attempt. We are just trying to help people to really get their first MLOps job. So, could you please introduce yourself, Sadik, to our audience?
Sure, sure. So I'm Sadik. I have been working in the data world for more than 15 years now. I've been seeing different roles from backend engineering, data engineering, machine learning engineering, and now more into the MLOps direction. I am a co-founder at Datamax. Together with my co-founder, we have started Datamax 3 years ago, and we help our clients build their data and machine learning tech stack and everything that is needed to build machine learning products.
Wow, cool. That sounds quite interesting. I mean, it's also interesting to see how you transition from software engineering role to data engineering role, and now like working as a principal data and ML engineer. What actually got you interested into the data world?
Um, yeah, it was sort of me gravitating always towards the data part of the problem. I've been working in different sites, different projects, different products, and with different teams, and sort of always I was picking up tasks that were more related to the databases, to
Hmm.
the data, and that's how I figured out that I sort
You
of
like
like this work. Later, here I am.
cool, cool. And I guess even though your title is not like ML ops engineer, but I guess you had to do a lot of things related to ML ops, even though you are ML and data engineer, right?
Yeah, there is a lot of confusion with
Yes.
the titles in this space right now. Everything is changing a lot for the moment. Sure, what would be the right title for the work I'm doing? It's always overlap of responsibilities, overlap of skills, and this is sort of where I'm working now, moving machine learning workloads into production.
I see a lot of confusion, as you said, the role of ML ops. And I have also been asked what is ML ops for you, because it looks like different people have a bit different definition of ML ops, even though there's kind of standard definition. So in your case, what's ML ops for you?
Um, For me, an MLOps engineer or MLOps in general is the the science of running machine learning models in production. Of course, we are very well aware of this famous graph from Google about the hidden technical debt in
Mm-hmm.
machine learning, where the machine learning code is
5%.
only parts of the effort of bringing machine learning workloads into production, and then you have a whole lot of components around it. And MLOps takes care of bringing all these parts together, gluing everything together, and making sure that models can be deployed in production, are monitorable, and they can also be iterated on. They can be once there is a new version, it can easily be deployed with
Mm-hmm.
automation, and then also everything that is running around it is still working even with the new version.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it also looks like it has more DevOps, but applied into machine learning, right? Plus other stuff, not only like DevOps and machine learning, but it involves several other activities.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, based on also the name, looks like there is an influence of MLOps from the DevOps
DevOps.
methodology, and it certainly helps the automation that DevOps brings into the traditional or more traditional software um, life cycle. This is what MLOps tries to bring into the machine learning world.
Mm-hmm. Cool, thank you. Actually, I also find it a bit confusing between the role of machine learning engineer and MLOps engineer, let's say, based on the size of the company, small size, medium size, large size. I guess it's more defined on large scale or company or large size companies, but in the smaller to medium, I guess roles are a bit, a lot of things are overlapping. Could you please clarify something on that?
Yeah, not all companies have distinctive roles for MLOps and MLOps engineer and machine learning engineer. However, in the companies where there is such a distinction, there is the machine learning engineer role is closer to machine learning model development, while the MLOps engineer is more into the deployment side of the problem, monitoring closer to the users, where the users are using these models, while the machine learning engineer is closer to the development of the model.
Mhm. But yeah, I see that in the smaller companies, ML engineer, I mean, they are working with data scientists, but they are like responsible for building up the model, putting that on the production. So does that mean they can also be called as ML ops engineer in a small sized company?
Yeah, I think so. It it's an evolution in the career path for everyone, and I believe um, the success of such machine learning initiatives, machine learning product initiatives, is in overlapping skills between um, data scientists, machine learning engineers, and data engineers. There, I don't believe into having a clear cut between the responsibilities of
Hmm.
each role. Should be an overlap, and of course, you don't need one separate person for each role, especially in smaller companies.
Yeah, yeah, true. Yeah. So we can at least think in this way, I guess, right? Like in the small to medium sized company, if machine learning engineer, he's responsible to deploy like things, models and products, and also work closely with data scientists to like build up the model. They don't need ML ops engineer, but let's say there are like 10 different data scientists, 10 different data engineers, 10 different ML engineers building like working on the data and machine learning model part. They need really a good way to host, let's say, the model onto the production, good CI/CD pipelines, good way to debug different steps of the MLOps life cycle, not MLOps, but let's say machine learning life cycle. In that case, they need like a dedicated team or a dedicated person who could manage this infrastructure, provide a service to data engineer and machine learning engineer, right? So that's mainly, let's say, in the large scale companies.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah, cool. And do you, by the way, remember what was your first production level MLOps project?
Um, my first MLOps, uh, I'd say MLOps related project was when I was working in a consulting company. Our goal, our project with the client was to build a pipeline. We were working in hospitality industry,
Mm-hmm.
and the goal was to find a way how to increase basket size for customers by providing them with personalized recommendations about
Okay.
um, what they might need in there. Of course, there were a lot of components, a lot of moving bits and pieces in there, and having to figure out from from the needs of a customer what we should be based on their historical behavior, also
Mm-hmm.
based on other third-party data sources that were decided to build this whole chain of steps. and also multiple models, NLP models at that time.
I mean, by hospitality, do you mean like hotel, this industry, or
Yeah, hotels, bars, restaurant, businesses
yeah?
involved in the his
So you,
hospitality
you had to
industry.
recommend, let's say, like Airbnb hotels, living rooms,
Yeah,
this and that.
we were more in retail, so our project was with an wholesaler.
Uh-huh.
Wholesalers are the ones that where your restaurants go to buy stuff. Um, so instead of buying in
Okay.
sales, you need to figure out what is this customer particularly interested on.
Mhm.
Also, at what price range are they? So there are different price ranges in hospitality, and yeah, now you need to with all these variables, you can
Mhm.
to
But probably you already had a team, right? Like data scientists might have came up with the model, and then you were responsible to probably take
yeah,
things
yeah.
from data scientists,
Um,
put things on
we
production.
were a mixed team of data engineers, machine learning engineers, and data scientists, and we were all working together to provide such recommendations. It is really getting.
Yeah, I had to mute and unmute.
But
I don't
do
know.
you can you hear it as well?
Now, no. It's like when I just mute and unmute, it's gone.
Yeah, it was
It's
was
quite.
giving me also.
You
It
also have
feels
that
like
issue.
fire alarm. Okay, okay.
Maybe you can, if you hear that sound, you could just mute and unmute, and then it might go away.
Yeah, I can try.
And like when you were starting your career as a like, I mean, you already started with software developer, but when you were starting with ML ops stuff, was it hard for you to get all the concepts and like apply that? Or what was like kind of challenges that you faced at that time?
Back then, as it is now, it was very confusing to figure out what's going on, what is what, do I need this or do I not need
Mm-hmm.
this? And a lot of concepts are moving, evolving very fast.
Mm-hmm.
So figuring out my way in this whole information jungle has been rather challenging.
Mm-hmm.
However, it is important to try things, to understand what works, what doesn't work. I, for example, work or learn well by doing things. So
Mm-hmm.
I'd always try and use some of the tools that were suggested, some tools that were trending at the moment, and see if I can use them, if they do what I expect them to do,
Mm-hmm.
or am I having the wrong expectations what one particular tool should be
Yeah.
doing? So it's always trial and error, testing things, trying new things, reading blog posts.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, very important is to read the documentation of the
Yeah.
tool. Um,
You know.
and that's how one can get a hang of what is going on, how components or tools work together, um, and then eventually with experience things start getting easier.
Yeah, and did you take any kind of courses or done a boot camp or something just to get into ML ops related things, or you already tried some data engineering thing and then gradually tried to move into ML ops?
Yeah. So in my studies, we were focusing a lot in data and information system management.
Uh-huh.
It was a bit easier for me to get started in this kind
ML
of
related
tool
things.
stack.
Mhm.
Then gradually started working with data engineering tasks, and then more machine learning engineering tasks.
Yeah.
So it was a process. There were a lot of iterations. Um, Certainly, I did do some online courses. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to do some boot camps.
Okay.
But I think it's important to start trying something, start doing something, and then be willing to iterate over it. And this
Improve
is
the things.
how one learns and gathers experience on these trending topics.
Yeah, I mean, one of the challenging thing that I personally find is there are lots of online resources, blog posts, courses, tutorials, YouTube videos, this tool, that tool, this ML flow, airflow, DAG flow, this and like meta flow. Too many things are there, and as a beginner, when you try to get into to like want to try out something, you really get confused. Should I try this or that? In that case, what would you recommend? Like, how should people who are trying to begin with should approach like all these information overflow?
Um, I think one should start with tried and tested tools. Imagine Airflow has been around for a long time. There is
Mm-hmm.
a big community around it. One can start testing how orchestration works with Airflow and then gradually move towards more complex tooling like Kubeflow,
Mm-hmm.
orchestration tools like Flight that have been around for less time. Also, some of these tools require more complex setup around it. So for Kubeflow,
Mm-hmm.
you need to have a Kubernetes cluster and so on.
Yeah, that's kind.
I'd recommend to everyone to start playing around with things. You can try serving ML models with Flask. Flask is
Mm-hmm.
has been around forever, as long as
Yeah, yeah.
almost as long as Python. So one can try such tools, build smaller test products, small iterations, and then continue on, see how it goes from there.
Yeah, yeah, I think that that's a good a recommendation. At least to try out. If you don't understand, just try to find out something that's kind of popular at that time, and then try out to build something smaller. I mean, don't think too much about is this good, bad, will it exist after 10 years or not. I think initially it's important to grab the concept first, I guess, and then try just pick up one of the popular tool, try that out, and then once you, I guess, have a hands-on experience, it makes things easier to try out some other tools as well, because over the time we kind of notice, okay, we can't do this and that thing because with this tool, so let's try out. So
Yeah, it's important to get started. So
yeah.
not to think too much.
Yeah, cool. Now let's talk a bit more about your work style. Like, how do you work? Or how what does your day-to-day job look like? Like, if you have to work on any kind of MLOps project.
So usually it is a lot of close collaboration with the
Mm-hmm.
data engineering team or people with the data science team. Of course, we have defined our priorities within the team, what will be working, what are our current priorities. And then sometimes there is a lot of debugging, figuring out why they're responding not so fast, why, for example, we have bad data arriving from the sources today, all sorts of other issues that might be coming up. So most of the time we are in close collaboration with the data science team,
Mm-hmm.
trying to understand what is the expected response, why are we getting such response,
Mm-hmm.
and then figuring out
And
where the issue might be. Of course, we do start by checking the monitoring dashboard to see what has been going on, how is the model behaving, and
mm-hmm.
if everything looks as it is supposed to be um, looking. Yeah,
Cool.
and and then development of new features, new tasks,
Okay.
new.
And do you
Uh,
also follow any kind of work process? Don't know. There are several work structure like Scrum, Kanban, sprint wise. Do you follow any kind of process like that?
um, So this usually depends on the project where we are working on. It is most of the time is agile methodologies,
Mm-hmm.
be it Scrum, Kanban. However, depends on what is more fitting to current project. For example, if project is in development mode
Mm-hmm.
or we are developing a lot of features, then for me it feels like Scrum is a better fit.
Mm-hmm.
However, when projects are um, less on feature development mode but more on maintenance and consolidation
Yeah.
phase, Kanban could be a better fit in this
Uh,
case. I know there are a lot of strong
but
opinions on this. For me, it's not a set in stone decision.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
something
yeah.
that can
I mean,
change and
yeah, that's true. I
can
mean,
evolve depending on what fits best to the team.
true, true. I mean, I have been working on a Scrum environment, but now I'm working in a Kanban kind of setup. It's fine. At the end, we need to get the job done on the
Yeah,
scheduled time, right?
uh, as long as the job is done, then
Yeah.
it's good.
Like, can you maybe give one concrete example on, like, let's say you were working on some recommender system, data scientist, you and ML engineer or someone, they already had like requirement collected from the stakeholders. They implemented something, I don't know, in notebook, I guess, that a data scientist, they probably try a lot of things in the notebook. They came up with a model and they said, now we want to deploy this model on production. Sadik, could you please deploy, or whatever you have to do, please do it. Then how would you proceed?
So I did have such use cases before. Um, However, this is not a very successful recipe um, because the mismatch happens that the such models are usually trained with off with a with a subset of data that has been downloaded or extracted some time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Not always is necessarily representative of the current state of the data that is running through the production workload.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Also, given that it's a subset, it does not represent the full load of the data that is available. Now, move, bringing this model or this artifact to production can be challenging because,
Yeah.
of course, it's trained on historical data or older data, and when you run the predictions through it, it will not be very representative of the current state of the data. Also, it can be challenging to just take this code that was produced in a notebook and
Mm-hmm.
simply retrain the model with imagine all the data that you have in your production database.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a lot of design decisions in this project, in this code base, might not be
Relevant for production.
relevant for production. For example, it's the use case that I see often is that if you have a small subset of data, you can go through them with a for loop.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you try to fetch all the data from the database or from
Yeah.
one big table, imagine the transactions tables um, for that has historical data for 5 years or 10 years,
Yeah,
then you
you can't
cannot
load
go
it.
through them with a for loop going row after row. You need to have some smarter constructs that can process all this data volume, for example, in parallel, and then try
Mm-hmm.
to aggregate, uh, try to reduce the data volume by aggregating this data, and then work only on the aggregation results.
Mm-hmm.
So such such problems happen usually when you get handed over just an artifact or just some code from the data science team.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always a good idea to start involving multiple or different profiles in the project so that you get both multiple
Mm-hmm.
perspectives in developing the product. So it is always, in my opinion, it's always a good idea to start the project with the data science and data
Mm-hmm.
engineering, and also involve the MLOps team so that you make sure whatever is being produced is something that can be deployed and is something that can
Mm-hmm.
be also monitored, um, and
Yeah.
it has some way of staying up to date, allowing for retraining and taking into consideration the new data that is coming in the system.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which means, as an MLOps engineer, you need to have really good understanding of what data engineer is doing, what data scientists are doing. Maybe you don't have to come up with new algorithm or statistics that you have to apply, but at least we need to be able to understand what's going on, what might like hamper the like final results, and then based on that we try to build the platform, right?
Exactly, exactly. You of course don't need to be a data science expert, uh,
Mm-hmm.
but it's very helpful to have an understanding of data science, data engineering, other um, types of work that go through that happen in a project so that you can be helpful and successful in your role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And until now, what kind of tech stack have you used? Like maybe you could explain phase by phase, because in ML lifecycle we have this project defined project phase, and then the data phase, modeling phase, and then deployment and monitoring phase. So there are different tools that can be used for multiple things. Maybe you could just explain things based on your experience, because it's kind of interesting also for me to know what like different companies, at least in Germany, are using, even though there might be popular tool in US which might not be popular in Germany, right?
Yeah, yeah. Um, so I see this as multiple layers in the
Mm-hmm.
tech stack. At the bottom is always the infrastructure. Can be AWS or GCP or Azure, any type
Mm-hmm.
of hyperscaler, and you need some automation on the infrastructure, so that your infrastructure is reproducible and documented. For this, Terraform is used a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Now with the license change from HashiCorp, Tofu is also coming up, but
Ah, okay.
less less than that. Terraform is more popular. And then, of course, you need to have your basic software engineering best practices, version control and collaboration.
Yeah.
Tools like GitLab and GitHub are very much used everywhere. And then, of course, you come to the development and experimentation stage. Jupyter notebooks, your favorite
Really.
IDE, be it Vim, be it VS Code, or be it JetBrains, whatever is your favorite tool.
Mm-hmm.
And then, in order to enable CI/CD, most of the companies are using their version control tool, GitHub Actions or GitLab CI.
GitLab. Mm-hmm.
So now, after having these basics, the infrastructure, development environment, and CI/CD for containerization and orchestration, it is used a lot of Docker and Kubernetes.
Mm-hmm.
However, this is not always needed or not always used. You can use other frameworks that help you with optimizing the compute. Now, of course, you have developed your code. You need um, a way to automate the training process and the deployment process for this CI/CD in combination with orchestration tools like Airflow or Kubeflow help
Mm-hmm.
you make sure that you can run all the data processing, data preparation, data transformation steps. Step is you have trained your model, you have prepared your data. Now, tools like MLflow help you with model registry, keeping track of all your trained models, also with model evaluation to check if the model that you have trained passes the baseline tools, the baseline performance requirements so that it can be deployed in production. Let's say your model is working very well, it is behaving as expected. To serve these models, you can use tools like Fast API, TorchServe,
Mm-hmm.
Racer, and so on. And then for monitoring model performance, um, a lot of tools like Grafana or custom-made solutions built on top of Prometheus and Grafana are developed, or you can use tools like weights and biases for
Mm-hmm.
monitoring the model performance. And then, of course, logging, collecting the logs and um, visualizing the logs. You can use Elk Stack for this or
Alistack.
OpenSearch. Elk Stack would be
Okay.
Elasticsearch,
Uh-huh.
Logstash, and Kibana.
Yeah, you see, there are again lots of tools. I guess we need to like to make things simpler for people really who are really getting started. What kind of things would you recommend? Like, let's say there's Hello World recommender system kind of thing, and you need to set up like the whole pipeline and then also the deployment pipeline. Then what would you suggest them to try out? Like maybe Airflow just to put in the data, pull the things into the data warehouse, simple like two or three different tools that people could try.
Um, so I'd definitely start with Flask application for model
Mhm.
serving, a simple Python script that does the model training and produces the model artifacts. Taking a look at Docker or similar containerization technologies, the dependency on your from your local machine when deploying uh, um,
Yeah,
machine learning solutions. Because of course, if you are deploying things to be used by other users, external users, you don't need them. You don't want them to be relying on your own machine.
yeah, true, true. And for this data ingestion and model training thing, what could be
Um, yeah, Airflow is easy to get
popular?
started and to to use. Although um, the common agreement is that Airflow would be a good fit for data processing tasks. I think it's important to keep the tool complexity as low as possible
Yeah.
at the beginning to get started.
Yeah. And also, I guess the selection of these tools also depends on in which direction people want to move in, right? Like, because even though it's ML ops, there are different areas where people can get into, like large language models. I mean, now people are terming it LLM ops. There are computer vision related ML ops. So, what are different areas people could go in ML ops?
Uh, yeah, this is a difficult question. I think, of course, as an MLOps engineer, there are levels of experience that one can collect and become senior staff engineer and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there is one particular branch that goes into ML infra
Uh-huh.
direction. So this would be ML infrastructure engineer that is more focused in enabling the data science and data scientists to work with the machine learning infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
I also hear a lot the LLM ops uh, type of role coming up. LLMs are another type of model, more complex and bigger and more difficult to handle. So they will of course need a certain specialization in order to be able to maintain such models
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
properly. Um, but I think once someone has the basics
Yeah.
understood and based on their passion, then they can find out a way to progress in their career.
Yeah, that's true. I think if they can do the basic thing, deploy like from start to end, a small simple model, they will like understand what are the different steps involved, and now the things are how to optimize those things, how to put different other pieces into each phases. Uh, I guess if the, as you said, if the basics are clear, people can like quite easily grab the concepts of LLMs or computer vision or any other specific areas.
Yeah.
Yeah, now I guess there are few other things also I would like to ask. Like now, when people are starting, what kind of projects do you recommend them to do? Because they have probably been through several courses, they have read this and that blog, but then at the end, when people are applying for a job, they need to showcase the project, and then what are like what kind of things would you recommend them to try out?
Uh, I would always recommend to build their own portfolio, open source, so that
Mhm.
um, the interviewers, the companies can look at their work and see, get convinced more about um, the candidate's skills. And there is, in my opinion, there is no better proof than the code that you have yourself written and
Mhm.
published.
And
And
how should they showcase that? Because I only see having a GitHub code is not enough.
so it is difficult. There is no right answer. I think having a GitHub presence or an open presence in any type of code sharing platform and um, keeping that up to date, continuously working on new projects, new
Mhm.
features, or anything that is exciting to you at the moment. Is,
Yeah, I mean, initially, I also think that's kind of hard to, not hard, but you could build up something random that's not so, let's say, useful. I mean, if you have some recommendation from your friend circle or something that people have already built, maybe you could give them ideas. Okay, you could be recommended system for this and that, do this and this, or you could build some churn prediction model, something like that, and then people could try those things out.
um, so there are. Um, it skips my mind the title right now, but there is a data set about cocktails and how they are prepared, and one can start
Mm-hmm.
working on figuring out new recipes or figuring out what are the most liked recipes and providing recommendations on these cocktails.
Mm-hmm.
Or there are certainly very famous data sets. One of them is the New York taxi rides.
Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
One can work on providing recommendations on what is
Taxi
the
rides.
expected load for one particular day, find correlations between weather, day, taxi rides, and so on, and provide recommendations to, I don't know, where should you place the taxis? How many
Mhm.
taxis should you have in order to capture take it from there?
Yeah, true, true. That's true. I mean, with these concrete things, I think people really get an idea. Okay, I can try Uber kind of things. I could try recommending products in e-commerce kind of thing, recommending cocktails or some food kind of things. I mean, I would also suggest to try out something related to IoT, because I also see, like, when I was applying for the job, I had to, there were like a coding task, of course, MLOps engineer, ML engineer, like the challenging task, it's not going to go anywhere. And then some of the challenges were to getting things like getting the data from the sensor data, try to put it on the server, create a data warehouse, analyze the data, how could we make use of those data, how could we set up different pipelines to deploy the things on production. So and yeah, these are, I think, we could try out. But I also think, like, while showcasing the project to the companies, I think there are certain areas that we need to focus on, right? Like, because you as an MLOps engineer, maybe it's useless to try out a lot of algorithmic things. So when you are building up a project, what kind of things do you think we should focus on to showcase?
Um, I think it's important to showcase the automation capabilities. So
Mm-hmm.
all of MLOps is to automate as much as possible to reduce um, uncertainty as much as possible with regard to the question: will this new version of the model work in production, or will it perform as well as the earlier version in
Mm-hmm.
production? So um, you know, one needs to be able to showcase that experimentation stage to deployment stage.
Mm-hmm.
How do we automate model deployment? And once once you have a newer version, how do you pair the artifacts, make them available, and then start?
Which also means we need to have a good documentation, right?
Uh, Certainly, it helps. It's of course not always there, um, but it's also important not to forget about monitoring,
Yeah.
um, building or building all the monitoring requirements in in the system. For example, you need to provide some health checks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you also need to be logging the responses of the model so that you can keep track of or detect some skews in the data, and then figure out if the model is still performing as it should,
Mm-hmm.
or is a new training required. Um, so I don't want to get too much into the
Yeah,
complexity.
yeah.
It's important to get started, and then with practice, with experience, one learns new things that are needed, and then you can
Yeah, yeah, true, true.
dive one level deeper, new things, learn new concepts, and also learn new technologies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, true. That's true. Do you also think that there might be internship kind of opportunities for people who really want to get into ML ops, and they had some software engineering background or DevOps, or I think it's easier for data and ML engineer to get into ML ops, but people with different background like software engineering, DevOps, and other roles, I think for them it's kind of hard to get into all the terminologies, concepts, and all those things. And do you, based on your experience over the like last 5-10 years, are there any internship kind of opportunities companies are trying to hire some MLOps people?
They are more and more new opportunities are coming up. I feel it's important for someone to have an open mind.
Hmm.
It will not always be described as an MLOps internship, um, but
Yeah.
usually such internship roles have some degree of flexibility in them, so one can go into the direction that he or she sees more more fit.
Hmm.
I think also for experienced engineers, be it software engineers, data engineers, and so on, there is absolutely space to jump into the machine learning engineering. There's always um, important to have some open mind and some flexibility. Full stack and the work that you are looking for, you are searching to do.
Mhm.
However, they understand how data works or how software works, have an edge in tool stack and workload.
Yeah. And do you see, let's say there are beginners who already tried couple of demo projects and now they want to do some kind of real projects? Do you see any platform or groups, meetup groups, or any online forums where people just, let's say they post on, okay, I want to do this and that as a POC, can someone help me because it requires ML data and also ops part, and if any beginner or any practitioner who really want to do that as a volunteer could do that, do you know any kind of platforms or something like that?
So there are a lot of local communities around machine learning, MLOps, and so on. One that me and you are part of is the MLOps
Yes.
community. Um, the community is very active, especially here in Munich. However, if there are such roles where one can voluntarily work, I'm pretty sure there are a lot of NGOs or smaller companies that would appreciate such help, and one just needs to
Fine.
search to search in the right portals. However, I would always recommend to get involved with your local community. I'm sure there are
Yeah.
people that are willing to help.
Yeah, because that's also a challenging thing to find. Even though you are willing to volunteer, you are willing to give your weekends and build up a profile to work on some kind of voluntary real world projects. You don't find people who really want to give you.
Um, yeah,
There's this MLOps community group. I think you are also a part of that, this global group, and then there are lots of channels, jobs, MLOps question and answered. And when I see a lot of people trying posting jobs, people also posting, I want to work as a volunteer, but it's still there's a gap. I guess there are a lot of people who just want to build a POC. They need people as a volunteer, they don't find that, and there are volunteers who want to work, they don't find the right person who gives them a real world project. I don't know, we need to do something about that, I guess, through these local communities.
certainly agree. And it is definitely helpful to make such opportunities more visible. Would definitely be an interesting
Oh,
solution.
yeah, also the group learning, like the concept of group learning, I mean, we do that quite often in the universities, but out of university, when you are working as a professional, you sometimes lose those things, group learning, knowledge sharing. I guess it's also good if in the local communities people who are beginners sit together, talk with each other, they might have different backgrounds, share the knowledge, try to convince each other. People who have ML experience shared the knowledge with software engineer who had like software deployment experience, shared that with the ML engineer. With that, I guess they could also work together on common project and build up the profile together. But again, it's a local community that people should try to attend and talk to each other.
Yeah, and it's important to have initiative. It doesn't have to be there. It's
Yeah.
one can start.
Yeah, that's, I mean, ML Ops Beginner is one of the such kind of
Absolutely.
initiative. I just want to get people who really want to begin with ML Ops with different background, really help them to get started and then make them able to really have their first ML Ops job or ML Ops role in the same company or different company, whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah, and that's definitely a very good initiative.
Thank you. I hope it's going to work.
I hope so too. I'm sure.
Yeah, I think now we are like almost towards the end of the podcast. Maybe a kind of last question. What are the top three things like you'd recommend people who are applying for the MLOps role? Top three things.
Um, I think the most important thing is to just do it, um, just get started, um, and don't be afraid of mistakes. You will
Mm-hmm.
learn on the way. Um, However, it's important to get started and to get your first steps uh, on the field. Um,
Also, certifications. Do you recommend them to do some kind of certifications online?
um, Certifications are, they showcase your skills, your
Mm-hmm.
know-how. However, I feel like they put a burden on a practitioner that is just getting started on something. So in certifications, you really need to know a lot of concepts, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
how these concepts relate to one another, how probably also some implementation details depending on the certification, and this is not necessarily the goal for a practitioner or just someone that is getting started. So, in my opinion, for someone that is just getting started, it's important to just experience, have a feeling for what these tools are or how
Mm-hmm.
these tools talk to one another. What is a model? Um, how do I deploy one model? How do I make it accessible with an REST API and so on?
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So just getting started and doing things uh, on um, your own yourself is really something that I think gives a lot of insights on this.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, utilizing already existing tools um, or already trained models. You can
Mm-hmm.
use Hugging Face and
Yeah.
fetch models that are already trained there, and then use them in your pipeline, in your tool, in your pet project. So you don't really need to
Develop thing
always
model
have
from
your
the scratch.
own
Yeah.
um, trained model. Um, so the second thing would be use already existing tools, use already existing models.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third thing that I would recommend is try to understand how components glue together or
Mm-hmm.
work together. For instance, you might have an orchestrator like Airflow that you are using to process data and then run the next step
Yeah. Yeah.
or the next task in your Airflow pipeline. That is, I don't know, doing some other data processing or triggering some model training, whatever. So, trying to understand how these tools are related.
I guess we are towards the end of our podcast. So I'd like to thank Sadik for providing valuable experience and insights on how to get started with ML Ops. Do you have anything to share with our audience, Sadik?
Um, no, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me. Um, I think for the audience it's important to get started, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me in the socials as well.
Thank you, Sadik. I will share your LinkedIn or some
Yeah,
online
LinkedIn is
website,
fine.
yeah, as a description of this podcast. Yeah, so we are like wrapping this episode. So as for all our listeners, I would like to request if you have any feedback or questions that you'd like to be addressed through MLOps professionals, then please let me know so that I could ask them what are the problems you are facing to the MLOps professionals, and you can then like plan your job search journey or MLOps journey with the right information. So stay tuned and thanks for listening.